Mongol's biker gang has been arrested in connection with the murder of a rival gang member.
When the Mongols Motorcycle Club roared onto California's streets in 1969, few could have predicted its evolution into a global brotherhood. Founded by Hispanic Vietnam veterans seeking community, the club quickly built a fearsome reputation through unwavering loyalty and intimidating presence. From clandestine operations to public confrontations, certain members have risen above others in notoriety, becoming legends in their own right. Here are the most imposing figures to ever wear the distinctive Mongol patch. Number 10. David Little Dave Santillan.
The Mongols had a bad reputation on the streets. Go to one of their parties, they'll try to steal your bike.
The name David Little Dave Santillan might not immediately register with the general public, but within motorcycle club circles across America, few names commanded more respect during the 2010s. As the national president of the Mongols Motorcycle Club for over a decade, Santillan guided the organization through one of its most challenging periods, facing unprecedented pressure while maintaining the club's strength and territorial presence across the United States and internationally. What made Santillan remarkable wasn't physical intimidation, though he certainly wasn't lacking in that department, but rather his strategic mind and political savvy. Taking control after federal operations had decimated previous leadership, Little Dave inherited a club under siege. Law enforcement agencies across the country had the Mongols in their crosshairs, attempting everything from traditional prosecutions to unprecedented legal maneuvers aimed at stripping the club of its very identity, its patch and trademark. Lesser leaders might have seen the club crumble under such pressure, but Santillan proved equal to the challenge. Under his leadership, the Mongols fought back against the government's attempts to seize their patches through trademark law, a battle that went all the way to the Supreme Court. This wasn't just a legal skirmish over intellectual property. For the Mongols, their patch represents their very identity, earned through a demanding process and worn with fierce pride. The fact that the club ultimately prevailed in this existential struggle speaks volumes about Santillan's leadership during this critical period. What truly separated Santillan from many of his predecessors was his understanding of the changing landscape of motorcycle club culture in the 21st century. He recognized that survival required adaptation without abandoning core principles. While maintaining the club's traditional strength and territorial presence, he implemented subtle modernizations to club operations that helped the Mongols navigate a world of increased surveillance and scrutiny. This balance between tradition and innovation allowed the club to not merely survive but thrive under his watch, expanding into new territories while strengthening existing chapters. Unlike some previous leaders who courted publicity, Santillan generally maintained a lower profile, understanding that effective leadership often happens behind the scenes. He built strong relationships with chapter presidents across the country, ensuring unity of purpose while respecting the traditional autonomy of local chapters. This approach created a more cohesive national organization while preserving the grassroots culture that had defined the Mongols since their founding. Santillan's leadership style reflected his personal journey within the club. Having earned his patch through years of dedicated service, he understood the Mongols from the ground up. His rise through the ranks gave him credibility with old-timers, while his strategic vision appealed to younger members. This unique combination allowed him to bridge generational divides within the club, creating a more unified brotherhood during his tenure as national president. Perhaps most impressively, Santillan managed to maintain the Mongols' standing among other major motorcycle clubs during a time of shifting alliances and conflicts. Under his leadership, the club continued its long-standing rivalry with certain organizations while navigating complex relationships with others. This delicate balance required diplomatic skills alongside the traditional toughness expected of a Mongol's leader, and Little Dave proved adept at both. The dramatic end to Santillan's presidency reveals much about the precarious nature of power within motorcycle club culture. Around 2021, recordings allegedly made by his wife Jessica surfaced, suggesting he might have been cooperating with law enforcement, the cardinal sin in club culture. Though Santillan denied these allegations, the damage was done. The mere suggestion of informing was enough to end his leadership, regardless of his years of service or previous accomplishments. This sudden fall from grace highlights the uncompromising code that governs motorcycle clubs. No matter how high a member rises, no matter how much respect they've earned, certain boundaries cannot be crossed without severe consequences. Whether the allegations against Santillan were true or not became almost irrelevant. The suspicion alone was enough to trigger his removal from power. This dramatic shift in leadership echoed an earlier transition in the club's history, when another ambitious president saw his reign collapse under very different circumstances. Where Santillan maintained a low profile until his sudden downfall, his predecessor, Ruben Doc Cavazos, had actively sought the spotlight, a decision that would ultimately contribute to his own dramatic fall from power. Number 9. Ruben Doc Cavazos. Few figures in Mongol's history have generated as much controversy as Ruben Doc Cavazos. His rise to power, dramatic tenure as national president, and spectacular downfall represent one of the most captivating chapters in the club's storied history. Before becoming the most powerful man in the Mongols' MC, Cavazos worked as a respiratory therapist, hence the nickname Doc, an unusual background for someone who would eventually lead one of the country's most feared motorcycle organizations. Doc's rise through the Mongols' ranks was meteoric by club standards, fueled by ambition and charisma that set him apart from typical members. When he ascended to the national presidency in the early 2000s, he brought a radically different vision for the club's future. One focused on aggressive expansion, increased publicity, and modernization of the club's operations. This vision would dramatically transform the Mongols during his tenure, though not always in ways that traditional members appreciated. Under Cavazos's leadership, the Mongols experienced unprecedented growth, establishing new chapters across the United States and internationally. This expansion wasn't limited to traditional motorcycle enthusiasts. Doc actively recruited from street gangs and other organizations, bringing in members who were attracted to the club's fearsome reputation rather than the lifestyle of riding. This approach dramatically increased the Mongols' numbers and street presence, but also diluted the traditional biker culture that had defined the club since its founding in 1969. What truly separated Cavazos from previous Mongols' leaders was his hunger for the spotlight. Breaking with the code of silence that traditionally governed motorcycle clubs, he actively courted media attention and cultivated a public persona. This approach culminated in his 2008 memoir, Honor Few, Fear None, which provided unprecedented insights into the inner workings of the club. For traditional members who valued privacy and discretion, this public exposure represented a troubling departure from club values. Perhaps most controversially, Cavazos made the unprecedented move to trademark the Mongols' name and distinctive logo, essentially claiming personal ownership over symbols that generations of members had worn with pride. This decision would later create serious problems for the entire organization when authorities attempted to seize control of these trademarks, a legal battle that would continue long after Cavazos's departure from the club. Doc's reign came to a dramatic end in October 2008 with Operation Black Rain, a massive federal operation that targeted the Mongols' leadership. Agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives had spent years infiltrating the club, gathering evidence against Cavazos and dozens of other members. The subsequent raids and arrests devastated the Mongols' hierarchy, with Doc himself facing numerous serious charges. What followed was perhaps the greatest betrayal in the club's history. Facing significant prison time, Cavazos allegedly cooperated with federal authorities, providing information about club operations and members. In the world of motorcycle clubs, where loyalty is the highest virtue, such cooperation represents an unforgivable sin. The Mongols responded by formally expelling Cavazos from the club, stripping him of his patch and all associations with the organization he once led. The legacy of Ruben Cavazos within the Mongols remains deeply complicated. His leadership brought the club to new heights of power and recognition, expanding their territory and membership significantly. Under his watch, the Mongols became perhaps the most recognized motorcycle club in America, alongside the Hells Angels. Yet his ego and ambition also exposed the club to unprecedented legal scrutiny, and his apparent cooperation with authorities violated everything the Brotherhood stood for. Years after his fall from power, Cavazos gave a warning within the Mongols, a reminder that loyalty to the patch must come before personal gain or fame. Current members are taught about his betrayal as an example of how not to conduct themselves, regardless of rank or position within the club. The dramatic rise and fall of Doc Cavazos stands in stark contrast to the founding members who established the Mongols with a different ethos, men like Roger Pinney, whose old-school approach helped build the foundation that Cavazos would later exploit and nearly destroy. Number 8. Roger Pinney. To understand the Mongols' MC and what makes them unique in the world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, you have to go back to the beginning, and that means talking about founding member Roger Pinney. Unlike many of the club's later leaders, Pinney wasn't interested in fame or fortune. What he helped create in Montebello, California in 1969 was something born out of necessity and brotherhood. Pinney was among the Hispanic Vietnam veterans who found themselves rejected by existing motorcycle clubs due to their ethnicity. These men, hardened by war and further toughened by discrimination, formed the Mongols as a haven for those who had nowhere else to turn. Pinney's influence on the club's early culture cannot be overstated. He helped establish the traditions, rituals, and code that would define the Mongols for decades to come. Long before the diamond-shaped patch bearing the Mongol warrior became infamous across America, Pinney was just another young man from East Los Angeles looking for his place in the world. His childhood in the predominantly Hispanic neighborhoods shaped his understanding of loyalty and community from an early age. Growing up in an environment where outsiders often viewed his entire community with suspicion, Pinney developed the thick skin and watchful eye that would later serve him well in both military service and motorcycle club politics. When the Vietnam War escalated in the mid-1960s, Pinney was among the thousands of young Hispanic men who answered the call to service, whether through enlistment or draft. The exact details of his time in Vietnam remain closely guarded in Mongols' lore, but brothers who knew him speak of combat experiences that left him fundamentally changed, as war does to all who face its brutal realities. What is known with certainty is that Pinney saw enough action to earn several commendations and develop the 1,000-yard stare that many veterans brought home from Southeast Asia. Upon returning to California, Pinney, like many veterans, sought the adrenaline and brotherhood he'd experienced in combat. Motorcycles provided the rush, but the existing club scene wasn't welcoming to Hispanic riders. Attempts to join established motorcycle clubs were met with explicit rejection based solely on ethnicity, a bitter pill to swallow for men who had just risked their lives for the country that continued to treat them as second-class citizens. This rejection became the catalyst that would birth an entirely new brotherhood. The founding meeting of what would become the Mongols took place in a small East Los Angeles bar in 1969. Pinney was among the 13 original members who gathered that night to form an alternative to the clubs that had rejected them. The choice of name was deliberate, invoking the fierce Mongol warriors of history who conquered vast territories through unity, discipline, and tactical brilliance. The patch design featuring a Mongol warrior on a chopper motorcycle was sketched out that very night, reportedly with Pinney contributing key elements to what would become one of the most recognized symbols in motorcycle club culture. What made Pinney particularly respected was his authenticity. In an era when many outlaw bikers were playing a role, Pinney lived the life completely. He wasn't interested in the Hollywood version of biker culture that was beginning to take shape in the late 60s and early 70s. For him, the Mongols represented something real, a true brotherhood of men who had faced combat overseas only to come home to a country that didn't want them. Under Pinney's influence, the early Mongols established a reputation for extreme loyalty to each other and relentless hostility toward their enemies. They quickly became feared throughout Southern California, expanding their territory through intimidation and strategic violence. While not as publicly known as later leaders, Pinney's fingerprints remain on the organization's DNA to this day. One of Pinney's most significant but least acknowledged contributions was the establishment of the club's approach to internal conflict resolution. Drawing on both his street upbringing and military experience, he created systems for addressing grievances that kept most problems in the family, rather than spilling into public view. These protocols included formalized meetings where members could air grievances, clear lines for escalating serious issues to chapter leadership, and final authority resting with national officers for the most significant matters. This structure helped prevent the kind of internal chaos that destroyed many similar organizations in their early years. The expansion of the Mongols beyond Southern California began under Pinney's watch, with chapters forming in Northern California and neighboring states through the early 1970s. Unlike later growth that sometimes prioritized numbers over quality, these early expansions happened organically, usually when existing members relocated and gathered like-minded riders around them in new territories. Pinney reportedly insisted that new chapters maintain the original vision and values, personally traveling to ensure standards were met before new charters received official recognition. While Pinney helped establish the Mongols Foundation, the club's evolution would produce members who became legendary for specific incidents rather than organizational leadership. Individuals like Christopher Stoney Ablett, whose actions would dramatically escalate one of motorcycle club history's most notorious rivalries. Number 7. Christopher Stoney Ablett. In the violent history of motorcycle club rivalries, certain moments stand as inflection points, events so shocking they forever change the landscape. Christopher Stoney Ablett's name became synonymous with one such moment, a single night of violence that escalated tensions between rival clubs to unprecedented levels and earned him a permanent place in motorcycle club folklore. As a member of the Modesto chapter of the Mongols, Ablett might have remained relatively unknown if not for his actions on September 2, 2008, the night that shook the biker world. The long-standing rivalry between the Mongols and their chief rivals had been simmering for decades, punctuated by periodic violent confrontations across California and beyond. Territorial disputes, bar fights, and highway skirmishes were common, but there were unwritten rules about how far these conflicts would go. Ablett's actions would shatter those boundaries in the most dramatic fashion possible. According to court records, Ablett traveled to San Francisco wearing his Mongols' colors, itself a provocative act in territory controlled by a rival club. There, outside a bar in the Mission District, he encountered Mark Papa Guardado, president of the San Francisco chapter of his club's main rivals. What followed was a brutal confrontation that ended with Ablett shooting and stabbing Guardado to death on a public street, in full view of witnesses. In the world of motorcycle clubs, targeting a chapter president wasn't just another escalation, it was a declaration of total war. By killing not just any rival member, but a chapter president, Ablett had crossed a line that few had dared traverse before. The brazenness of the attack, happening in the rival's own territory and against such a high-ranking member, sent shockwaves through motorcycle clubs nationwide. Unlike many who might have gone underground after such a high-profile incident, Ablett eventually surrendered to authorities in Oklahoma. His subsequent trial exposed details about motorcycle club operations and hierarchies that members would have preferred remain private. Prosecutors alleged that Ablett had traveled to San Francisco specifically to hunt down rival club members, even claiming he had been offered a special patch, allegedly given to Mongols who had killed for the club. Ablett's defense team presented a different narrative, arguing that he had acted in self-defense after being attacked by Guardado, who had recognized his Mongols affiliation. This created a complicated legal strategy, acknowledging the killing while disputing the premeditation and motive. It also raised questions within the motorcycle club world about whether Ablett's actions had been sanctioned by Mongols' leadership or represented a solo decision that put the entire club at risk of retaliation. After a trial that attracted national attention, Ablett was convicted of murder in aid of racketeering and sentenced to life imprisonment plus 20 years. The severe sentence reflected both the brutality of the killing and the prosecution's success in framing it as part of broader club activities rather than an isolated incident. Ablett's case became a centerpiece in federal efforts to target motorcycle clubs using racketeering statutes with far-reaching implications for the Mongols and other organizations. The aftermath of Guardado's killing and Ablett's conviction rippled through the motorcycle club world. Security at clubhouses tightened, with members traveling in groups and remaining hyper-vigilant for retribution. Law enforcement agencies increased surveillance on both clubs, anticipating a wave of revenge attacks that could endanger public safety. While the expected all-out war didn't immediately materialize as many feared, tensions remained elevated for years afterward. What makes Ablett's story particularly significant is how it demonstrates the international reach of motorcycle club conflicts in the modern era. News of Guardado's killing spread rapidly through biker networks worldwide, affecting club politics in countries far from California. Actions taken by a single Mongol in San Francisco reverberated in clubhouses across Australia, Europe, and beyond. Evidence of how motorcycle clubs had evolved from local organizations to global brotherhoods connected by shared symbols, traditions, and conflicts. Ablett himself has become a complicated figure in Mongol's mythology, viewed by some as a warrior who demonstrated absolute commitment to the club, by others as a reckless individual whose actions brought unnecessary heat on the entire organization. This ambivalence reflects the complex reality of motorcycle club culture, where courage and loyalty are prized, but strategic thinking and preservation of the club are equally important. While Ablett's notoriety came from a single dramatic incident, our next Mongol built his fearsome reputation through decades of involvement in Australia's biker scene, becoming perhaps the most recognized motorcycle club figure in the country through his unprecedented journey across multiple organizations. Number 6. Troy Mercanti. Few figures in the international motorcycle club scene have a story as unique as Troy Mercanti. While most notorious Mongols built their reputations within a single organization, Mercanti's legend spans multiple clubs, countries, and decades. His journey from Australia's Club de Rose to the Finks and finally to the Mongols represents something almost unheard of in the typically loyal world of motorcycle clubs. A man who not only switched patches multiple times, but rose to prominence in each organization. Mercanti began his biker life with the Club de Rose in Western Australia, where he quickly established himself as a force to be reckoned with. His imposing physical presence and unwavering commitment to club business made him a natural enforcer and leader. Already known to law enforcement, his profile rose significantly after a violent incident at Perth's Geisha Bar in 1997, which resulted in the death of a security guard. Though Mercanti wasn't directly responsible for the death, the incident cemented his fearsome image in Australia's biker scene. In a move that shocked many in the motorcycle world, Mercanti later patched over to the Coffin Cheetahs, traditional rivals of his former club. This transition demonstrated both his influence and his willingness to break even the most sacred rules of biker culture. Switching clubs, especially to join rivals, typically results in violent retaliation from former brothers who view such moves as the ultimate betrayal. That Mercanti survived this transition speaks volumes about his reputation and connections. His time with the Coffin Cheetahs saw him rise to greater prominence, becoming one of the most recognizable motorcycle club members in Australia. Media outlets regularly featured his name in coverage of biker activities, and law enforcement considered him a significant figure in Western Australia's club scene. His influence extended beyond his immediate chapter, with connections throughout the country's motorcycle club world. But Mercanti's club hopping didn't end there. After a reported falling out with the Coffin Cheetahs, allegedly including a severe beating at the hands of his former brothers, Mercanti made his most dramatic move yet. He joined the Mongols MC, helping establish and strengthen the American-founded club's presence in Australia. This final transition completed a journey almost unheard of in motorcycle club circles, having been patched members of 3 major organizations. Mercanti's involvement with the Mongols came during a period of significant international expansion for the club. Originally founded by Hispanic Vietnam veterans in California, the Mongols had grown into a global organization with chapters in countries around the world. In Australia, they employed a strategy of patching over existing clubs, convincing entire chapters to trade in their old colors for the Mongols' distinctive emblem. Mercanti became instrumental in one of the largest patchovers in Australian history, when Finks chapters across the country became Mongols overnight in 2013. Throughout his biker career, Mercanti has faced numerous legal troubles, including a highly publicized conviction for assaulting his former partner, which resulted in a significant prison sentence. His time behind bars did little to diminish his status, however, another testament to his unusual resilience and standing in the motorcycle club world. Upon his release, he returned to the Mongols and resumed his position of influence. What makes Mercanti's story particularly compelling is his ability to not just survive, but thrive after club transitions that would have meant death for less influential bikers. This speaks to a combination of personal charisma, strategic alliance building, and the kind of fearsome reputation that makes even enemies think twice about challenging him directly. In a world where loyalty to a single club is normally paramount, Mercanti rewrote the rules without paying the ultimate price. Mercanti's public profile reached new heights in 2021 when the West Australian newspaper published what they described as the very first formal interview Troy Mercanti has ever given to the media. This unprecedented break from the traditional code of silence offered rare insights into the thinking of a man who had seen the motorcycle club world from multiple perspectives. The interview demonstrated Mercanti's continuing relevance in Australia's biker scene decades after he first patched into the Club de Rose. His story reflects the increasingly global nature of motorcycle clubs in the 21st century. While organizations like the Mongols began with specific ethnic and geographical identities, international expansion has created a more complex network of chapters united by shared symbols and traditions rather than common backgrounds. Mercanti's role in bringing the Mongols to prominence in Australia demonstrates how a club founded by Hispanic riders in California could eventually incorporate members from entirely different cultural contexts. While Troy Mercanti's notorious journey through Australia's motorcycle club hierarchy made him a legend down under, his reputation in international biker circles paralleled that of Justin "Mooch" Delaretto, another influential figure who commanded similar respect within his own brotherhood on American soil. Number 5. Justin "Mooch" Delaretto.
This wasn't for me anymore, and so almost my whole chapter at the time was interested in joining the Mongols with us. I had flown to Florida, met some Mongols. I was given the green light to start this chapter and came back and talked about it, but as the way these things go, some of those guys that said they were interested were also interested in power and position and knew if we left then they could be a chapter P or whatever.
The California desert has a way of forging men like iron in a furnace, hardening some, breaking others. Justin "Mooch" Delaretto emerged from this crucible as someone whose reputation extended far beyond Bakersfield's dusty outskirts where his journey began. Standing over 6 feet tall with powerful arms that could wrestle an engine into submission or hold firm in life's hardest moments, Mooch wasn't born into notoriety. He earned it through a complex journey of seeking belonging in a world that rarely offers it freely. His story began simply enough with an old Honda dirt bike gifted on his 12th birthday, igniting a lifelong passion for motorcycles. The nickname Mooch came naturally from his youthful habit of borrowing tools and parts, but everyone knew it was a fair exchange for his natural mechanical talents and reliable character. By his mid-20s, he'd built a reputation spanning 3 counties as the mechanic who could fix the unfixable, his small repair shop becoming a sanctuary for riders seeking expertise without judgment. What distinguished Mooch wasn't just his skill with machines, but his understanding of people. In a subculture where trust is currency more valuable than cash, he recognized the unspoken language of loyalty that defined relationships among serious riders. Weekends spent thundering through California's winding mountain roads offered temporary escape from a life that seemed stuck in neutral, a failed marriage behind him, and mounting bills that kept sleep at bay. The pivotal moment came at a motorcycle rally outside Fresno. While others kept their distance from a group of patched riders whose presence commanded immediate respect, Mooch found himself drawn to their immaculately maintained Harleys. When one developed an issue, his reputation preceded him, and soon he was elbow-deep in an engine while several members watched with growing appreciation. That chance encounter opened doors into a world few outsiders ever truly understand. Initially, Mooch was just a trusted mechanic, reliable, discreet, skilled. But something about the brotherhood he witnessed called to something deeper within him. It wasn't the intimidation factor or rumors of trouble that attracted him. It was the unshakable bond between men who'd found what most spend lifetimes searching for, genuine belonging and purpose. For someone who'd always felt slightly adrift, this represented an anchor in life's storm. The transformation from outsider to insider tested every aspect of his character. At 32, physical demands pushed him to limits he didn't know existed. while mental challenges forced him to question everything about himself. There were nights of doubt, exhaustion seeping into his bones as he lay in a Spartan apartment he could barely afford after giving up regular work. But each morning brought renewed determination. For perhaps the first time, he was fighting for something beyond mere survival. Few understand what happens during this period of proving oneself worthy of brotherhood. For Mooch, it meant being broken down and rebuilt stronger. Every aspect of his character was tested, not just mechanical skills, but loyalty, judgment, and heart. Under the watchful eye of mentors who recognized something in him even he couldn't see, Mooch earned respect through unwavering reliability rather than empty words. As years passed, Mooch evolved from prospect to mentor, his voice carrying weight in matters that affected not just his immediate circle, but the broader community. His old-school approach, valuing tradition and brotherhood over financial gain, earned respect even from those who might stand on opposing sides. In an increasingly divided world, he became known as someone whose word carried weight, who could navigate tense situations with a calm demeanor that prevented unnecessary escalation. Perhaps Mooch's greatest legacy lies in his mentorship of younger men seeking their own path. Recognizing in others the same hunger for belonging that once drove him, he took time to guide them, not rushing their journey, but ensuring they understood that true brotherhood transcends patches and colors. It's about standing beside those who've earned your trust, regardless of what storms may come. While Mooch was building his reputation within the Mongols through years of loyal service across the southwestern United States, a very different kind of legend was taking shape. A man who had become one of the most successful undercover agents in American law enforcement history was preparing to risk everything, including his life, to infiltrate the closely guarded world that Mooch called home. This man, known to his real colleagues as Agent William Queen, was about to embark on a dangerous journey that would test every aspect of his training, courage, and psychological resilience. Number 4. Agent William Queen. The thin line between hunter and hunted has never been as dangerously blurred as in the life of William Queen. Before he became a legend in law enforcement circles, Queen was just another dedicated ATF agent looking for his next assignment. What he couldn't have imagined was that this assignment would require him to completely erase his identity, embed himself among men who would kill him without hesitation if they discovered his true purpose, and live a lie so convincing that sometimes even he questioned who he really was. His transformation into Billy St. John, a bearded Harley-riding prospect seeking to earn his patch with the Mongols Motorcycle Club, would become one of the most remarkable undercover operations in American history. The physical transformation was just the beginning. Queen grew out his hair and beard, adopted the rough mannerisms and vocabulary of outlaw bikers, and immersed himself so deeply in his cover identity that the boundaries between William Queen and Billy St. John sometimes blurred even in his own mind. But looking the part was the easy part. To truly infiltrate the Mongols, a club notorious for their extreme violence and tight security against outsiders, Queen had to earn his way in through a grueling prospect period that tested every aspect of his courage, commitment, and ability to think on his feet while surrounded by danger. What made Queen's undercover work particularly remarkable was how high he managed to climb within the club's structure. Most undercover agents consider it a success just to gain membership in such organizations, but Queen eventually became vice president of the San Fernando Valley chapter, giving him unprecedented access to the inner workings of the Mongols. This extraordinary achievement put him in rooms where major decisions were made, illegal activities were planned, and the true nature of the organization was laid bare, all while he memorized faces, names, and details that would later form the backbone of one of the most successful prosecutions of a motorcycle club in history. The psychological toll of this deep cover assignment was immense and often overlooked in retellings that focus on the danger and excitement. Queen developed genuine friendships with some of the very men he was investigating, creating moral conflicts that he struggled with throughout the operation and for years afterward. Living in constant fear of discovery while simultaneously feeling guilty about the inevitable betrayal of men who had come to trust him created emotional pressures few could endure. Queen later described moments when he questioned not just the mission, but his own identity after spending so long pretending to be someone else. Every day brought new tests and dangers. Queen had to participate in enough illegal activity to maintain his cover while avoiding crossing certain lines that would compromise the eventual legal case or his personal ethics, a nearly impossible balancing act. He rode with the club to events where violence was not just possible, but expected, knowing that one misstep or moment of hesitation could expose him. He wore a wire to meetings where discovery meant certain death, with no backup close enough to save him if his cover was blown. The constant vigilance required would have broken most agents within weeks. Queen maintained it for nearly 2 years. The operation, codenamed Black Biscuit, ultimately proved successful beyond expectations. Queen's evidence led to the indictment of 54 Mongols members with 53 convictions, one of the most successful undercover operations against a motorcycle club in history. The evidence he gathered revealed extensive criminal enterprises including drug trafficking, weapons violations, violence, and more. His testimony and subsequent trials put numerous dangerous individuals behind bars for lengthy sentences, significantly disrupting the Mongols' operations throughout California and beyond. After emerging from his undercover identity, Queen documented his experiences in the best-selling book Under and Alone, which revealed to the public the extraordinary dangers and complexities of deep undercover work. The book later attracted Hollywood's attention, with film rights optioned for a potential movie. Queen's story resonated with readers not just because of the danger and drama inherent in his mission, but because it raised profound questions about identity, loyalty, and the psychological price paid by those who live double lives in service to law enforcement. Queen's legacy extends beyond the specific cases he helped build against the Mongols. His methods and experiences have been studied by new generations of undercover operatives, informing training programs and operational protocols. The techniques he developed for maintaining cover, managing stress, and building trust without crossing irredeemable moral lines have helped shape modern undercover operations against criminal organizations of all types. His work represented a high watermark in the government's efforts to combat motorcycle clubs through infiltration rather than just surveillance and informants. While Queen's operation targeted the Mongols as an organization, painting its members with a broad brush as participants in a criminal enterprise, elsewhere events were unfolding that would challenge this perspective. Not every encounter between motorcycle club members and law enforcement fit neatly into the narrative of criminals versus cops. Sometimes the lines blurred in tragic ways that raised difficult questions about tactics, perceptions, and justice. Such was the case with David Martinez, a Mongols member whose story would force a re-examination of how law enforcement approaches motorcycle clubs and the human consequences of those approaches. Number 3. David Martinez. The sound of splintering wood and shouted commands shattered the pre-dawn silence at David Martinez's family home in San Gabriel, California, on October 28, 2014. Like dozens of other Mongols members targeted in coordinated raids that morning, Martinez was awakened not by his alarm, but by the violent entry of a police tactical team executing a search warrant. What happened next would become one of the most controversial and hotly debated incidents in the ongoing conflict between law enforcement and motorcycle clubs. In a matter of seconds, Pomona Police SWAT officer Sean Diamond would be fatally wounded by a shotgun blast, and Martinez would find himself facing murder charges that could send him to prison for life. Unlike the stereotypical image many people have of motorcycle club members, Martinez's life had layers of complexity that didn't fit neatly into simplistic narratives. He shared the home with his father, a 70-year-old man with no criminal history who would become a crucial witness in the case. Martinez had family, people who depended on him and knew a side of him very different from the image conjured by his Mongols membership. This complexity would become central to the defense as his case moved toward trial, forcing jurors to consider the human being behind the patch rather than just another faceless member of a group labeled as a criminal organization. The raid that led to tragedy was part of Operation Pure Luck, a multi-agency effort targeting the Mongols across Southern California. These pre-dawn raids had become standard procedure in operations against motorcycle clubs. Tactical teams in full battle gear, flashbang grenades, battering rams, and overwhelming force designed to disorient and subdue targets before they could resist. But Martinez's defense would later argue that in the confusion of being awakened by the violent entry, with his elderly father already confronting the officers at the door, Martinez believed his family was under attack by rival club members, not police. What made this case particularly remarkable was Martinez's decision to reject plea offers and take his chances at trial. A risky strategy, considering the automatic sympathy juries typically feel for fallen officers and the prejudice many hold against motorcycle club members. His defense team constructed a narrative centered on self-defense and protection of family, arguing that Martinez had no way of knowing the people breaking into his home were law enforcement officers. This defense strategy represented a bold challenge to the typically one-sided portrayal of such incidents, where the motorcycle club member is automatically presumed guilty regardless of circumstances. The trial revealed complicated facts that didn't fit neatly into either side's preferred narrative. Evidence showed that the fatal shot was fired after police had already breached the door, but questions remained about whether Martinez could clearly identify them as officers in the chaos and darkness. Testimony established that Martinez's elderly father had been the first to confront the entry team, raising the possibility that Martinez was responding to what he perceived as a threat to his parent. These nuances transformed what might have been a straightforward case into a complex examination of police tactics, reasonable fear, and split-second decisions made under extreme stress. In a stunning outcome that sent shockwaves through both law enforcement and motorcycle club communities, Martinez was acquitted of the most serious charges, including first-degree murder and assault on a peace officer. The jury's decision suggested they found credible his claim that he did not know he was firing at police officers when he discharged the shotgun. While he was convicted on some lesser firearms charges, the verdict represented an extremely rare outcome in cases involving the death of a police officer, particularly one where the defendant was a patched member of a group classified as a criminal organization by authorities. The Martinez case highlighted growing questions about the militarization of police tactics, particularly in raids targeting motorcycle club members. Critics pointed out that the overwhelming show of force, pre-dawn timing, and violent entry methods created precisely the kind of confusion and fear that might lead to tragic outcomes. Supporters of law enforcement countered that such tactics were necessary when dealing with potentially dangerous suspects with connections to organizations known for violence. The debate exposed fundamental differences in how motorcycle clubs and their members are perceived, as criminal enterprises requiring aggressive suppression or as complex organizations where individual members deserve individualized justice. Officer Diamond's death was unquestionably tragic. A dedicated public servant lost his life in the line of duty, leaving behind family and colleagues who mourned his sacrifice. At the same time, the case forced a more nuanced conversation about the tactics used against motorcycle clubs and whether alternative approaches might reduce the risk to both officers and subjects of investigation. This complexity avoided easy answers, revealing how the entrenched conflict between clubs and law enforcement often produces victims on all sides. While David Martinez's split-second decision during that fateful police raid thrust him unwillingly into the public spotlight, it was members like Chadwick Gene Swopes who quietly worked behind the scenes to prepare brothers for precisely such encounters, developing security protocols and situational awareness training that reflected his understanding that in the world of motorcycle clubs, survival often depended on both quick thinking and careful preparation. Number 2. Chadwick Gene Swopes. The first time Chadwick Gene Swopes walked into a Mongols gathering in Southern California, nobody paid much attention. Average height, soft-spoken, with none of the intimidating physical presence you might expect from someone who would rise to become one of the club's most respected members. But appearances can be deceiving in the world of motorcycle clubs. Within just a few years, the mere mention of Swope's name would be enough to make rival club members think twice about crossing into Mongols' territory, and his reputation within the Brotherhood would become the stuff of whispered legend. What set Swopes apart wasn't his size or even his willingness to use violence, though he proved more than capable when situations demanded it. His true power came from something far more rare: absolute, unwavering loyalty, combined with a tactical mind that could see 3 moves ahead in the complex chess game of motorcycle club politics. While others might rush headlong into conflict, Swopes carefully considered the consequences of each action, weighing immediate satisfaction against long-term benefits for the club. This strategic thinking made him invaluable during periods of tension with rival clubs. Swopes earned his patch in the late 1990s, a time of significant expansion for the Mongols as they pushed into territories traditionally controlled by other organizations. This period of growth didn't come without resistance, and confrontations were common as the black and white colors appeared in new regions. During one particularly tense standoff outside a bar in Arizona, Swopes reportedly stood alone against 6 members of a rival club, refusing to remove his colors despite being dramatically outnumbered. According to those who witnessed it, he didn't raise his voice or make threats. He simply made it clear through his calm demeanor that violence would have consequences far beyond that parking lot. The respect Swopes commanded came not just from his courage in facing down threats, but from his skill in diffusing situations that might have led to unnecessary heat from law enforcement. In an era when federal agencies were increasingly targeting motorcycle clubs with RICO investigations and long-term undercover operations, Swopes understood that certain types of conflict brought unwanted attention. He developed a reputation as someone who could settle disputes through intimidation rather than actual violence, a valuable skill that kept both rivals and authorities at bay while the club continued to strengthen its position. His influence within the Mongols extended beyond handling external threats. Swopes took a particular interest in the prospect program, personally evaluating potential members and weeding out those he suspected might not have the necessary loyalty or discretion to wear the patch. Members who came up under his mentorship describe a demanding but fair leader who emphasized the club's traditions and history. He insisted that new Mongols understand they weren't just joining a club. They were becoming part of a lineage stretching back to the Hispanic Vietnam veterans who founded the organization in Montebello, California in 1969. What many outside the club never realized about Swopes was his intelligence. Law enforcement officials who encountered him during raids or questioning often made the mistake of underestimating him based on stereotypes about motorcycle club members. This was a costly error, as Swopes had an encyclopedic knowledge of relevant laws and constitutional protections. He reportedly conducted informal training sessions for members on how to interact with police, what to say, and more importantly, what not to say, and how to protect the club's interests during investigations. This knowledge helped the Mongols weather several federal operations that might otherwise have caused more significant damage. As Swopes' reputation grew within the club, so did the mystique surrounding him in the broader motorcycle world. Stories about his exploits, some true, some certainly exaggerated, circulated at gatherings and runs. One persistent tale involved his handling of a member who had been caught stealing from the club. While most such betrayals would result in immediate and violent expulsion, Swopes allegedly took a different approach, orchestrating a complex plan that left the thief exposed to both legal consequences and the wrath of a rival organization. The strategic elegance of the punishment enhanced Swopes' reputation for being several steps ahead of everyone else. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Swopes' story is how he managed to remain largely invisible to the public, despite his significant influence within the club. While some Mongols embraced the notoriety that came with membership, Swopes operated in the shadows, rarely appearing in photographs and avoiding situations where he might draw individual attention from law enforcement or the media. This low profile served him well during federal investigations that targeted more visible members while often overlooking his central role in club operations. By the mid-2000s, Swopes had become something of an elder statesman within the Mongols. His counsel sought on major decisions affecting the club's future. His ability to adapt to changing circumstances, particularly the increasingly sophisticated law enforcement tactics being deployed against motorcycle clubs, proved vital to the organization's survival during challenging times. While maintaining absolute loyalty to the Mongols' traditions, he recognized that the methods for protecting those traditions needed to evolve as the external threat landscape changed. What eventually happened to Chadwick Gene Swopes remains something of a mystery outside the club. Some say he retired quietly from active involvement, maintaining his membership but stepping back from leadership. Others suggest he continues to play a significant role behind the scenes, his influence undiminished despite his advancing years. What's certain is that his approach to handling club business, strategic, measured, but backed by absolute resolve when necessary, helped shape a generation of Mongols who followed in his footsteps. Among those who learned from Swopes's example was a younger member whose approach couldn't have been more different on the surface, but who shared the same core loyalty to the patch, Scott Jr. Erickson. Where Swopes operated in the shadows, Erickson would become one of the most visible and controversial Mongols of his era. His story intertwined with some of the club's most high-profile confrontations with both rivals and law enforcement. Number 1. Scott Jr. Erickson.
When I came back from Hawaii, I still hooked up with some of them guys. And when I joined the Mongols, my friends just couldn't believe it. It was like, what are you doing? They go, what are you doing? They go, these guys are worth the angels.
The tattoos covering Scott Jr. Erickson's arms tell stories that his lips never would. Faded blue ink depicting skulls, motorcycles, and the distinctive Mongol warrior logo chronicle a life devoted to one of America's most notorious motorcycle clubs. At 54, Jr. carries himself with the quiet confidence of a man who has survived decades in a world few outsiders understand. His weathered face, framed by a grey-streaked beard, bears the scars of bar fights, crashes, and the California sun from countless miles on the open road. Born in the industrial outskirts of San Bernardino to a factory worker father and a waitress mother, Jr.'s path to the Mongols began in his troubled teens. After dropping out of high school and cycling through a series of dead-end jobs, he found purpose in the mechanical simplicity of motorcycles. His natural talent for engine work quickly earned him a reputation at local bike shops, where he eventually caught the attention of Mongols members who frequented the garage where he worked. The fraternity they offered appealed to a young man with few other prospects and a deep-seated desire to belong. His prospecting period for the Mongols lasted 11 brutal months. The other members tested his loyalty through increasingly demanding tasks, physical endurance trials, and situations designed to ensure he could be trusted with the club's secrets. Jr. endured it all with a stoic determination that would later become his trademark within the organization. When he finally received his full patch in 1995, the celebration lasted 3 days, leaving behind memories largely obscured by cheap whiskey and cheaper amphetamines. Within the hierarchy of the Mongols, Jr. rose steadily through a combination of unwavering loyalty and calculated restraint. While other members courted attention through flamboyant violence, Jr. built a reputation as the problem solver. His imposing physical presence, 6'2" with forearms thick as fence posts, often made actual violence unnecessary. When conflicts with rival clubs or internal disputes threatened the chapter, Jr.'s mere arrival could de-escalate situations that seemed destined for bloodshed. This unusual restraint kept him largely off law enforcement's radar during the major RICO operations, targeting the club in the early 2000s. The numerous tattoos covering Jr.'s body serve as a living record of his decades with the Mongols. The club's logo dominates his back, while his arms display an evolving chronicle of significant events. Members lost, battles won, prison stints served. The 3 teardrop tattoos near his right eye speak to losses that he never discusses, even with fellow members. His knuckles bear the scars of countless fights, while the slight limp in his walk stems from a 2007 shootout with members of a rival club outside a Nevada bar. Despite his unwavering dedication to the Mongols, Jr. somehow maintained connections to conventional society that many members couldn't. He faithfully sent money to support his aging mother until her death. His daughter from a brief marriage completed college with his financial support, though she maintains careful distance from his club life. This duality puzzles younger members who struggle to reconcile his fearsome reputation with his occasional glimpses of sentimentality. The evolving landscape of motorcycle club culture hasn't escaped Jr.'s notice. Increased federal pressure, infiltration by informants, and the younger generation's casual approach to traditions deeply trouble him. Where the Brotherhood once operated in shadows, social media and reality television have dragged aspects of club life into unwelcome spotlight. Junior has adapted by pushing his chapter toward more legitimate business ventures while maintaining the core brotherhood that attracted him decades ago.